Hello, welcome to this presentation on the Law of Freedom Part 8, Chaos and Order. My name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. This is a continuation of the presentation series, Natural Law, the Science of Morality. And the Law of Freedom would be Part 5 in that series, and this presentation is Part 8 within that Part 5. So let's get started. What's chaos or order got to do with it? I was thinking of the song, what's love got to do with it? Well, why are we talking about chaos and order? What does that have to do with the law of freedom? So why get into chaos and order when talking about the law of freedom? Because immorality creates the chaotic presence of slavery. Immoral behavior serves chaos. Moral behavior serves true order. True freedom is the positive outcome of the law of freedom. True freedom is true order. The absence of true freedom has the presence of slavery, which is chaos. Chaos and order are represented in many facets of reality under different terms like entropy and syntropy, evolution and involution, or fear and love. They represent tendencies or forces that propel or drive change in the universe and in ourselves. Understanding these two forces amplifies one's perspective of how people are serving the immoral, entropic, and involutionary, chaotic, evil path that goes against their individual and collective betterment. So what is order? Well, let's get into a dictionary and etymology. Well, this is from the etymology from Etym Online. So from Middle English, ordre, order, I guess it's pronounced, from Old French ordre, ordine, ordine, that's order, rank, from Latin ordinem, accusative of ordo. So here we're getting into what it really means is that it's the row, rank, or regular arrangement. Literally, row of threads in a loom, from the Proto-Italic ordo, to arrange. So essentially we're talking about arranging things. That's what order is. When you order something, when there is order, is you're arranging things or things are arranged. And we'll see how that relates to row rank as well. So if you arrange things, you are exerting control to arrange them. Things don't get arranged we're talking about when we arrange things. So when you arrange them, when I arrange them, when we arrange them, we are exerting control. In order to arrange them, that means that they were not arranged. Otherwise, we would not be arranging them. So in order to change the way something is and bring it to a more ordered configuration where we arrange it in a certain way, well, we are exerting control. So you can arrange a marriage. Arranged marriages are decided by parents for their children. You can arrange a date for a marriage. You can arrange a picnic. You can arrange things in a row. See, we can see how now it's relating to a row, how things are a row, because when you're arranging things in a row, you can think of a table. You can sort a table, and that has rows of data. You can put things in a row in a certain way. Some people follow orders in a ranking system. They are controlled by others. So that's where we get into this lower form of order. It's ordering things in a way that doesn't serve true order, as I was mentioning in the previous slide. True freedom is true order. But we're talking about controlling others, where their behavior is arranged by others, where they're in a ranking system. They're in a ranking, orders of ranks. Lower ranks follow the orders of the higher ranks. That's where there's the control of others. So you're exerting control, but it's a negative form of control. It's not a positive form of control. So you can make an order for a product. You arranged for something to be sent to you. You can order a list of names alphabetically. You can take a bunch of names. Hey, I like 5 names. Let's order them alphabetically. So you can sort them and order them alphabetically. You can order or arrange things in your house. You can view relative degrees, grades. Orders are levels to things within a spectrum or scale. Reality has various orders of complexity where things are more or less arranged, organized, and ordered. So that gives an overall understanding of how we view this concept of order in many, many ways, and we use it in many different ways in the human world that we've created. Some of them are amoral, and some of them can be immoral. So just because you're ordering something and you're exerting control to arrange something, to put things in a specific configuration, it doesn't mean it's for the positive ends of true order. Now we get to chaos. Chaos is borrowed from the ancient Greek chaos, meaning a vast chasm or void. A void is nothingness. Chaos in this sense is where there is an absence of any order at all. If you have a void, there's nothing. So there's nothing to order. But chaos can be a decrease in the current amount of order. Chaos is representative of more order relative to more order that was, is, or can be present. Sorry, I read that wrong. Chaos is representative of more disorder relative to more order that was, is, or can be present. So if you have a specific arrangement of configuration of things and you make it less ordered, well, that is representative of more chaos relative to where it was before. It doesn't mean that what you have is true order. It just means that it's more ordered than it was, and it could be more ordered in the sense of more control to arrange it in a specific way, as opposed to before it was less arranged and controlled. But in that previous way, it could have been more aligned, not that it was true order, but more towards that spectrum of true order, as opposed to exerting more control. And it doesn't automatically bring it towards more true order. It brings it in the opposite sense to more control and enslavement. So we can see it at basic levels in daily life. A plate is ordered. It's a construction of arranging some kind of matter in a specific shape. So the configuration of atoms are already in a material. We take the material like clay, and then we shape the clay into a plate, and then it dries out or we bake it, and then it's the shape of a plate. But a plate can break, and a plate that breaks is chaos. The elements that compose the plate aren't ordered in a specific configuration that makes it a plate any longer. The structure and ordering of the plate is nullified, and the state or condition of the plate becomes representative of chaos instead. So plate shatters. It's a bunch of jagged pieces that can cut you. Even if it just splits in half, well, it's not a plate anymore. It's 2 halves of a plate that you can't use as a plate. It's not the specific configuration and arrangement and ordering of that porcelain or clay or whatever it was that made it a plate. It's no longer a plate. Entropy isn't a force in standard physics. It's an inferred, descriptive, emergent measure of disorder or randomness in a system. A pattern within the whole of a system. A system, which is an ordered configuration, has a natural tendency to progress or change to more disordered or random configurations. Entropy is why order dissolves. It can't be measured like other physical properties in a system as something in itself. Entropy relates to a progression towards more chaos. So for example, how spread out energy is, the amount of disorder or dispersion that is present. And some examples of entropy are when you open a perfume bottle, the scent spreads out throughout the room. This isn't because entropy is pushing the molecules. So it's not a force that's like, oh, well, here's the entropic force that's pushing the molecules. No, it's just the way things work. And when it's in a confined space, then it seeks to spread out. And that's, you could relate it to the implicate order where things are, anyways, we'll be getting into that. So this happens because there are more ways for the molecules to be spread out than clumped together. So when you confine things in a closed space, well, some things, they have a tendency to spread out. Well, that's representative of entropy. Entropy also comes into play when energy changes form, like when heat flows from hot to cold. Entropy tells us how spread out the energy becomes, not how much energy there is. Another example is as an ice cube transitions from a solid to a liquid state, its molecules move from an ordered arrangement to a more disordered one. So it's more disordered. It's not that it's completely disordered. It's just less ordered compared to the arrangement when it was a solid state as ice. Syntropy. Now, entropy relates to a progression towards more chaos, incoherence, simplicity, or uniformity. The opposite of entropy is negentropy, negative entropy, or syntropy. Syntropy is the progression towards more order, coherence, complexity, diversity, or purpose or meaning. While physicists have found a way to quantify entropy within many systems, they haven't yet for syntropy. So does that mean that syntropy doesn't exist? Is that what it means then? Well, both tendencies exist. Otherwise, there would be nothing in the universe that was ordered. Planets, stars, life, brains, etc., you name it. It just wouldn't be there if there wasn't this tendency for things to have come into creation, to have existed, to have progressed through time and formulated and coalesced into all these various things and evolved. That wouldn't be possible if there wasn't this tendency for things to become ordered. It's a fundamental of the universe that this is something that can happen and does happen. And that's the opposite of what entropy is. And they've found a way to, looking at a system and the change in the system, and you can look at the things, the actual things that you can measure, the physical things that you can measure within the system, and then you can correlate that, you can infer the presence of entropy, of the tendency towards the disorder, right? As we talked about here. It's a measure of the disorder or randomness. It's a pattern that things have a natural tendency to progress or change to more disordered or random configurations. It helps explain why order dissolves. So you had something that had more order before, and then you can look at what is present in the system and its current configuration, and you can be like an understanding of that, like thermodynamics, and you can say, well, given what we understand about the properties in the system, that it will progress towards a different state, and then you can refer to that different state as more disorder, more uniformity, incoherence, and you refer to that as entropy within that system. Syntropy and entropy as forces. Now, while I did mention that they aren't physical forces, right, I said they aren't forces. Entropy and syntropy are not forces in the sense of classical or quantum physics like gravity or electromagnetism, but they behave as driving or guiding forces or principles in a system, setting boundary conditions for what can become of systems. Now, I talked about this in the first and second part of the law of freedom when I was talking about laws and principles, is that law essentially is what's in the back, in like, the code, you could refer to it in the back as a fundamental, in the back of the universe, like how things function in the background. There's the way things operate in the universe and what can happen and what can't happen. So because order can happen and because chaos can happen, because there can be an ordering and arrangement and there can be a dissolution of these things, These are principles in the universe because this is the way the universe operates. Entropy and syntropy may not be, quote, forces by strict definition, but they are functionally similar to forces as they represent the drive for change in a particular direction over time. They are opposing tendencies that drive change to more chaos or more order. They are fundamental organizing principles of change. So chaos tries to bring things in one direction, and entropy is representative of bringing things in another direction. So planets formed. Whatever conditions are present for planets to form, for stars to form, new stars come into existence. So syntropy is still in operation. It's not just purely entropy in operation in the universe, leading to the dissolution, dispersion, incoherence of everything in the universe. There's still entropy at play. Evolution and involution. Syntropy makes evolution possible, an unfolding of form and function from simpler origins. Syntropy is the tendency or principle that actualizes latent complexity, coherence, and interconnectedness. This would be the explicate higher order, as I think his name was David Bohm, the prodigy of Einstein. He referred to two types of order, implicate and explicate order, and I mentioned this in part 4 or 5 or something like that in the Law of Freedom presentations. I mentioned it briefly there. Entropy is the opposite of evolution, making involution or devolution possible, a folding in or dissolution, a loss of structure, leading towards equilibrium, uniformity, and this is the implicate lower order, where things are spread apart, equal distance, everything's pretty much the same, uniform everywhere. And when things coalesce and organize and group together, well, that's the grouping order, that's the explicate order. Entropy is the tendency or principle that constrains, disperses, and dissolves higher order constructs into simpler parts. So in one tendency, things get ordered, they get constructed, and then the other opposite is the dissolution of those things that get constructed. Syntropy, unfolding potential, generating new structure, creative, constructive, coherent, a universal pull towards organization, evolution, and potential, builds things up. Entropy, limiting potential, dissolving or compressing structure, it's dissipative, destructive, dispersive, a universal drain, pulling systems toward disorder unless resisted. It breaks things down. So this I've presented elsewhere before, many times. The symbols of chaos and order representative of Apep, Apophis, and Ma'at. I went into this in more detail in my presentation, Natural Law and the Science of Morality, Part 4, Morality, where I explain morality in depth. So I was just bringing it up here because this is how we've used symbols in the past to represent these concepts of chaos and order and how they relate to our existence as humans and our consciousness and our will and our behavior. So you can see Ma'at, order, justice, good, morality, syntropy, evolution, and Isfet was the force and the personification, anthropomorphization, or embodiment of that force was representative of the dark snake god Apep or Apophis. Will against involution breakdown. This is another one where I thought of a song. What is it called? Education breakdown? No. I forget what it's called. No. I forget. Anyways, I had it in my head, but now that I'm doing the presentation, I can't remember what it's called. Maybe it'll come to me. So I was playing on situation breakdown. I think that's what it is. So will against involution breakdown. The involutionary force disorders what was disordered. Its tendency is to break things down. The opposing force, evolution, counters it, orders and creates more grouping order constructs. Look at how we have to apply our will to get things done, to build, to create, to maintain a house, a room, etc. Leaving things be, and they decay from the previously ordered state. So we're always applying our will because there's always this involutionary breakdown, and we apply our will against that involutionary breakdown, this chaos, this entropy that's always at play. So don't do anything to upkeep something built, the ordered parts, and it will eventually degrade or break down from its original ordered state. Things naturally break down. A car will fall apart if you don't repair things. A room will build up dust that needs to be cleaned up. The erosion of wind and water breaks down rocks and chips away at brick and mortar of a house. These are just examples of this natural tendency at play. Entropy and syntropy of fear and love. So how did this... At the beginning I mentioned how there's terms that we can use for chaos and order. Some of them were entropy and syntropy, and there's also fear and love. But not in the natural way, not in the usual way. I mean that people view fear and love. So entropy and syntropy express in consciousness as forces that drive behavior. So here's where, again, we're going to understand more of how these are forces that drive change in the universe. And they manifest in human consciousness as the forces of fear and love. The entropic will is driven by fear. The polarity of fear correlates with falsity, evil, wrong, and immorality. The active entropic will violates the rights of other wills. This is immorality, which propagates involution. The passive entropic will doesn't work to end the immorality of the active entropic wills, which is a stagnation that allows the propagation of involution. Entropic will advances the involution of consciousness, which is to curl, ball up, contract, and suppress consciousness. So I just want to make it clear when I'm talking about active entropic will, that means you're active in this force of entropy, violating the rights, and there's passive entropic will that doesn't work to end that immorality. The syntropic will is driven by agape, love, or true care. The polarity of love or care correlates with truth, good, right, and morality. Syntropic will works to restore and or preserve the true moral order. Active syntropic will works to end evil, while the passive syntropic will doesn't create evil. Syntropic will advances the evolution of consciousness, which is to unfurl, expand, and grow consciousness. Evolving consciousness is done by knowing and choosing right over wrong, and doing the work of sharing that knowledge for others to do the same. That is the great work. Your voice of creation. Your voice, be it thinking, inner speech, speaking out loud, or in written form, or other forms that it could take, is a process where you can ask questions, imagine possibilities, invent answers, remove contradictions, refine the consistency of your conceptions, and verify truth. There's probably other steps to this as well that you could add, other processes that you could add. And this orders your mind. So doing these things helps to order your mind, because we take in information and we have to make sense of the information. So we use our inner voice, and we can also express it outwardly. And because we're aware of what we express outwardly, that is taken inwardly, and we can reflect upon it as well. So your voice and words represent your thoughts that lead to your actions. Your words influence others' thoughts and actions. Your internal reality influences change in the outer reality towards more order or chaos. Your voice can indirectly order aspects of the universe so that the universe is, quote, spoken into, close quote, existence. This is the logos, or the word of the Bible, right? The universe was spoken into existence. Let there be light. God of the Bible created everything with words. Well, we're relating how our voice internally, as the principle of mentalism, what we have internally is how we think and how we feel, and that becomes part of the driving motivations for how we act. Our actions are based on our internal state. So the external is based on the internal, and all of us together, from all of our internal states outwardly as the external actions, produce the external reality that we all exist in and cohabitate, and we co-create that because all our actions take part in creating this human world that we've created. Speaking moral truth promotes the generation of true order. Having never spoken moral truth to yourself or into existence for others to learn from is a form of not taking control of your voice and its creative power to reshape yourself and the world towards the true moral order. We must order our minds, which will order our behavior, and then have a world of order. So I hope this is making sense. By this process of us using our voice to order our minds, then we can attain moral truth within ourselves. So we speak it to ourselves, and then we can live it, and then we can speak it to others. And if we don't engage in this, then we're not using this creative power to reshape ourselves, first of all, and influence the reshaping of the world towards the true moral order. So we're not engaging in this power of speaking the world, the universe into existence. Moral agent of chaos. Moral behavior that is destructive or chaotic to immoral behavior still serves entropy and evolution. Immoral behavior goes against the order that moral behavior creates. There can be the construction of barriers to impede freedom, that would be immoral, and the destruction of barriers to allow freedom, which would be moral. There can be ordered, structured control or slavery that ultimately serves an entropic goal, and chaotic or dissolving freedom that ultimately serves a syntropic goal. So it's freedom that is chaotic, freedom that dissolves because it's dissolving the immoral, dissolving the control, dissolving the enslavement, and that serves a syntropic goal. Authority is control and slavery, serving the entropic process despite the seeming order that it creates. It's an artificial, false order, imposed on others, which violates natural rights and opposes the positive, true ordering, syntropic aspect of natural law. Passive will, inaction to evil. A fundamental problem of our human condition is the tendency to allow active, entropic, immoral wills to persist their behavior. Do nothing. Don't exert the syntropic will to stop them, because that's a hard thing to do. That's why people choose to let human-created chaos of enslavement by authority go on, as the opposite is to apply themselves to change it. So just let chaos reign by not using the will to order things. Just let things go. Let involution progress by the will of those devolving things and creating chaos or evil. We, the aggregate, need to apply our will to progress towards greater evolution and true order, or else it doesn't get done. And those who direct us towards chaos get their way and hold us back from a better life by restricting and violating our will and our rights. And this relates to the great work, because the great work is something that people, for the most part, overwhelmingly, 99.99999% of people are just not doing. They don't even know about it. And and even 99% of the people who do know about it aren't doing it. They're not interested in it because it's work. It's a hard thing to do. And so they're just letting it go on. They're not fighting against the evil. That's this, as I mentioned a few slides back, that's the entropic will, where you don't work to end the immorality. Evolution and will. Chaos and order are both part of nature. Choice, our will, matters in what we want to create. So what do we want to create? Will is applied to create more complexity and optimally more order, but can also create more disorder. Evolution promotes the advancement of consciousness. More complexity creates more diversity, potential, purpose, and meaning. More levels of consciousness emerge into existence because more complex, higher levels of ordering are created. For example, you can look at integrated information theory, which views things this way, pretty much. With higher levels of consciousness come higher levels of will and more creative potential from applying that will. Patterns from similarity and difference can be seen. Behavior can change with that knowledge of patterns to favor more optimal outcomes. Morality can be grasped. So as more levels of consciousness, you get to humans, even before humans, there's patterns of similarity and difference that other animals can engage in. They can choose more optimal outcomes for themselves. And when you get to us, well, we can see even more similarity, even more differences, analyze things even more, see more patterns, and use that to manipulate nature, existence, reality, to create more optimal outcomes, all the technology we've created. And most importantly, morality can be grasped at that level. Not that people are grasping it, but the potential is there within our level of consciousness to be able to understand objective morality. Evolution and morality. Agape love or true care leads to the evolution or unfolding of consciousness. Fear leads to the involution or folding in of consciousness. One helps move us forward. One helps us move forward. The other holds us back. Beings with more consciousness can be more aware of what is happening inside their psyche, which is what humans can do. We can self-reflect, introspect. We can have more self-awareness, self-knowledge. They have greater self-awareness, and with that higher order consciousness, the will can be applied to create even more order, complexity, and diversity into existence. So think of everything that humans have created. It wouldn't exist without us having created it. So there's the more we've ordered and arranged things, and we've grouped them in certain ways. So there's the more order that we've brought in. More complexity, things weren't as complex. And more diversity, there's more things that wouldn't be there. With more will, you have more potential freedom of action, and more freedom to create different things, and more freedom as a state of existence, because of how you can create more optimal ways of living. So if you think of everyone starting from scratch and doing things themselves, we wouldn't have all the technology we have. And we wouldn't have as many degrees of freedom. We would be stuck in the survival grind, just trying to survive for our whole lives. But we've cooperated and organized and divided tasks to make things more efficient, and we can harness more degrees of freedom and independence, I guess you could say, because of this cooperation. Not that things are ideal right now, but it's a way to see and understand how this freedom of our will and the more potential and more freedom of action, more freedom to create different things has led to more freedom as a state of existence in some respects. But we've also created delusions and things that don't exist in nature and ways of living that are not necessarily natural and promote immorality. And so we don't have as much freedom in our state of existence in that respect. So if that didn't exist and we were all living, toiling in survival, we might live in true freedom, but not have as many degrees of other types of freedom to do other things. So it's you can view freedom in this sense in many different ways. The will has more choices available and can choose between certain behaviors that will advance one forward, to serve one's betterment, and create more order and complexity, seeking out and gaining quality truth to improve and evolve consciousness through greater philosophical thought and technological creations will improve the quality and condition of living. And that's what we have now. We have a certain quality and condition of living that wouldn't be there if we hadn't have developed more philosophical thought and technological creations to get us here. This happens the most from the wisdom of right action, moral behavior, that is based in the conscious understanding of objective morality. So what I'm saying is the highest quality and the highest condition of living will happen the most from the wisdom of right action, which isn't the case overall in how we are using our thought and our technological prowess to invent things. Involution and immorality, the measure of being truly evolved, is being moral. Being evolved as a human means and necessitates being moral. Those who go against that are Those who go against that are devolving their individual and collective condition, or stagnating at best. Developing technology and using it to violate morality is a devolved direction to move towards. Beings that are more immoral than beings that are more moral are less evolved by comparison. Those immoral beings, the ones that are more immoral, are serving the entropic, involutionary force or tendency more than the ones who are less immoral, whether they realize it or not. Creating immorality violates the natural rights of others, restricts their freedom and potential, and often puts them in a state of fear. So you can just look at the world we live in and authority telling us we can't do things that we have a moral right to do. And if you do it, you're going to be punished. So then you're living in fear of being punished if you're doing that thing that you do have a right to do that they're saying you're not allowed to do. More immorality creates more fear, more restriction of consciousness, and more breaking down of the potential to create more complexity and diversity. So this is all stifling us, the immorality of authority and the restrictions of our natural rights. It puts us in a state of fear. That fear restricts our consciousness. It's the breaking down of the potential. This is this involution, entropic, chaotic force, the breaking down. Freedom to create. With will applied to create more order, complexity, and diversity towards more morality, that means we have more freedom towards the ends of true freedom. So if you're going to operate in the wisdom of right action, and you're going to engage in a moral way to create things, you're going to try to organize and arrange and exert control to make things more aligned with that, and maybe more complexity and diversity. You're going to end up with, ideally, creating more morality relative to where you are now. Because you're using more order, more complexity and diversity towards more morality, and as a result, the corollary is when you have more morality, you have more freedom. And that's towards the ends of true freedom, which is something that can be difficult to obtain in our current condition. It's always a possibility, but it looks bleak as something that we will in the lifetime of my existence, certainly. As we get more freedom and less control or slavery, we have the freedom to create more, to create new things that weren't there before, to create more order, complexity, and diversity, always aligned with morality, which provides more freedom to create more, etc. So it snowballs from there. So you can think of previous inventions where cases where the United States government has come in and bought the patent and squelched, they use their authority, their muscle, their way to silence people and to suppress technology. Well, the technology could have brought more freedom. You had the freedom to create the thing, but now you don't have the freedom to create the thing. So you don't create that new thing that wasn't there before. So that thing that got arranged in a certain way, that new order didn't come about, that complexity and diversity wasn't there. But if you are allowed to create that new thing, well, then it can bring new types of ways of doing things that you align with morality, and that provides, you can use that as a stepping stone, like first harnessing electricity to then get to, transistors and resistors and capacitors and getting to computers. It's all a stepwise progression. Well, you first had to be allowed to harness electricity and not being accused of serving Satan or something, and being executed for it. So because that was allowed to flourish and other things, then leads to more freedom to create more, etc. And it snowballs and snowballs until you get more and more things. And with new things created in our lives, we can have awareness of those new things. Someone can create something, we can be aware of it, we can integrate it into how we use things in our lives and behaviors, so behavior gets changed. So an increase in awareness is an increase in consciousness, or consciousness increases to some degree, potentially gaining new insight via recognizing new patterns and meaning. And this is a feedback loop propelling us forward. So again, with earlier discoveries that people integrate, and they see new patterns of how to integrate that into other aspects of reality, and then develop new things, create new inventions, etc. But then we have fear restricting potential. With control or slavery from authority restricting what we can rightfully do and punishing us for disobeying, we have more of the fear or involution polarity or force in consciousness, the fear or aversion of the threat of violence or chaos being imposed on us is present. The fear or involution or chaos expressed as a condition of our lives that consciousness exists within. So not only the fear or aversion within us that we feel, that we have a sense of, but also the fear, the motivation, the way that we live our lives. So I've gone into this several times in my Great Work Launchpad podcast series, that we're talking about the forces of fear or love as what motivates us. So when you're being motivated into certain behavior, well, that motivation comes from these polarities of chaos or order, fear or love, entropy or syntropy. And that's the condition of our lives that consciousness exists within, is an expression of these forces that are motivating us into this way of living. And that's how our consciousness exists. So restricting behavior and possibilities restricts thought, leads to less potential to be more aware of things, of patterns and meaning, which is a restriction of consciousness. In this fear of limiting and suppressing consciousness via less potential thinking, we have less clear thinking about things. So we're going to have less thinking about things. So if you're not thinking about things, you're not going to be able to develop more clarity of thought, because you're not even thinking about it to begin with, even if it's in a confused, cloudy way. So when we have this fear present and restriction of consciousness, it's limiting and suppressing consciousness. We focus on avoiding what we fear a lot of the times. this thing that we have aversions towards. We are averse to it. We go away from it. We focus on avoiding what we fear instead of pursuing what we would rightfully be able to pursue and the potentials it could lead to, of creating more order, complexity, and diversity compared to what presently exists. The potentials of creating new things to better our lives. So imagine free energy, for example. How the constriction of energy and boundless energy could free us from the constraints of scarcity and lack. Morality is the evolved choice. More moral living equates to more harmonious living with others and optimized survival. It's working together rather than alone and doing everything for ourselves. This makes life easier, a lot easier, and allows for more surplus and abundance. Who wants to work together with others who are violating or stealing from us or others? No one. You can't trust them. You don't want to be harmed. You don't want anything to do with them. And oddly enough, that's the world we have with authority and government, is we're coerced into accepting that way of life, and that's what we have as services we can't opt out of, and we have no choice but to have them, and we have money stolen from us at the threat of greater violence if we don't let them. So a better life free of being stolen from being violated comes with morality, not with more control or slavery from authority, which promotes moral relativism. The dark ones who serve involution want more immorality. They stagnate the understanding of objective morality, promoting moral relativism in order to inhibit seeing the immorality for what it is and learning from it. They propel the aggregate to just keep doing it or supporting or allowing it. So in the previous slide, I was talking about things that are created or people speaking, right? Or using your voice. And then that increases your awareness, can increase your understanding, can increase your level of consciousness. And then you can understand things. Well, they promote moral relativism so that we can't understand morality. That's why we need more people doing the great work of, ultimately, at the highest level of the great work is moral education. Because we live in a world of moral relativism, which is this fear restricting our potential. So our potential is being inhibited. And if you don't understand morality and you're convinced that something moral is immoral, or convinced that something immoral is moral, then you're going to champion that immoral thing as moral. Hence authority and government being championed by so many. So you can't see immorality for what it is. You can't see authority for what it is. You can't see government for what it is. And you can't learn from seeing it for what it is and change your behavior. So we just keep going down the same wrong path. And they don't want morality to be objectively known, because then it will shine light on their darkness. The moral arrangement. So bringing it back to the beginning, in conclusion, you can order, arrange, organize, or structure things in any configuration, which are all done through exerting control. But only self-control, aligned with moral truth, will create true order and true freedom. The control of violating the natural rights of others is chaos. That is not the control leading towards true order. The control of defense to right those wrongs restores freedom. So when there's violations of our natural rights and you exert control in a defensive capacity to right those wrongs, well, that is going to restore the previous level of freedom. Even if it isn't true freedom, we're not living in true freedom. It restores the previous level of freedom that was there. Even though it's degraded from true freedom, it will restore that level that pre-existed, rather than let the immorality persist and repeat. You can create the order of peace, good, right, and justice of a truly moral way of life. This is done by each individual controlling their own behavior. You can arrange things to be less organized, optimal, peaceful, good, right, just, or moral. And this is done by exerting control over others who didn't violate rights, superseding their will for yours, which violates their rights. And that is authority. That is government right there. What new order, what condition of the world do we want to create relative to the current one? What is the ordering of that new world? Are we collectively going to participate in or allow the creation of a light or dark new world order? Which side do you choose to serve? So that's the end of the presentation. I'll thank you for your time and attention. If you want more on this series, the previous 7 parts, go to evolveconsciousness.org and catch the videos on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute. And you can also watch the previous 4 parts of Natural Law, the Science of Morality presentations. And you can also check out my currently weekly podcast, vidcast, whatever you want to call it, live stream, entitled The Great Work Launchpad, where we try to influence people to understand what the great work is and become motivated and not stay stuck in the involutionary entropic force of fear as what is motivating them, but to step into the syntropic, evolutionary, love, agape, higher order force that can bring them more purpose and meaning and be an agent for getting us to be truly free and having our rights respected. So thank you once again. Take care. Peace.